Good morning, everyone. And welcome back. Hope everyone has had a chance to get a cup of coffee, something to eat. We have a busy schedule. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a bit of a recap. After yesterday's sessions, the planning committee got together and shared some thoughts about what we heard. It's those 8 people who were listed in the agenda. I took a few notes and will offer a sample of that discussion. Keep in mind this conversation happened at the end of the day after a few adult beverages in most cases, so it's very preliminary and not completely thought through. But we did think we heard a few themes related to the effectiveness of a science enterprise in the sessions yesterday. These observations aren't ordered in any intentional way. These things are going to require some additional thought. First, it's important to understand social factors affecting governance and management systems, and that extends to the management of science. We heard some examples yesterday of why that's the case, and we've got a couple of panels today where we're going to hopefully expand on that theme. Second, leadership engagement matters a lot. This is not an original observation. Yesterday we heard, for example, that there are different degrees of federal engagement and different federal relationships with states, tribes, local government, and non-governmental bodies in different regional systems. Those differences were primarily associated with the existence of official guidance in various forms, legislation, executive orders, etc. This is certainly going to be food for thought. Third, leadership linkages matter. Leadership on the federal side at the department level is important. Leadership between linkages between the bureaus that are implementing policy in the field and the parent department, Department of Interior for all the interior bureaus, Department of Commerce for NOAA, for example. Those linkages matter a lot. Linkages to governor's offices within states matter, we heard yesterday, direct linkages. And good tribal relations where tribal interests are affected are also important. So those leadership linkages among governments are very important to the effectiveness of science and management. Again, probably not an original observation, but we heard some useful specific examples yesterday. We also heard yesterday of different approaches to setting priorities where resources are limited. And we heard that despite the size of the issues in the 6 systems that we're discussing at this workshop, resources are limited everywhere. So setting priorities is important. There are likely different ways to do this, but it's clear that doing a good job of it is a pretty basic responsibility of science programs if they intend to serve management well. Next, effective communication and outreach are really important, and perhaps the message from yesterday is that this is something we need to remind ourselves of frequently. This is especially true where adaptive management is being attempted, and as we heard the answer, that it is being attempted everywhere. It's critically important to understand what uncertainty means to managers, stakeholders, and scientists because they, in some cases, view these things differently, some in terms of uncertainty, some in terms of risk or hazard. Programs, I think we heard yesterday, should be constituted to ensure that science serves the needs of managers and stakeholders and their perceptions of what uncertainty means in terms of how they conduct their business. We heard that climate change is a background expectation of scientists in all these systems. And it's potentially an issue that needs a fair amount of attention on the part of science programs in order to be sure that it's dealt with in a reasonable way from a science point of view, but in a way that will work given the political issues that exist in some regions. And those affect not only the issue of management of ongoing concerns, ongoing actions, but also the way climate change is used in planning. And last, and this is perhaps more a matter of substance than it is science substance in these systems than it is a matter of how science is conducted in these systems. We heard yesterday about the importance of integrated modeling to understand ecosystem dynamics. In several systems, it's very important because there's generally no unmodified ecosystem and no reference condition to refer to in estuaries. So modeling may be the only effective approach to sorting out the effects of management action. And integrated models in particular are hard to develop. They require a lot of effort. They're expensive, and figuring out a way to use that tool to leverage the efforts perhaps of multiple parties in an enterprise in order to develop those tools is something that requires quite a bit of attention. So those are just some initial thoughts. Again, that's a sample of the discussion we had last night. At the end of the workshop this afternoon, Jessica and Cliff will share some of their thoughts about next steps, and we'll likely have a more refined take on what we've been hearing. We're expecting to hear a fair amount more today. Today, rather than having regional reports as we did yesterday, we're going to switch to topical panels. The organizing committee chose topics we think will have resonance for the San Francisco Bay Delta community, and I think we expect they'll have some for others. And we're actually extremely pleased with the strength of the panels we have for each of these topics today. So, quick overview before we begin on what the panels are. First up, science strategies in large systems. This panel consists primarily of science leaders and will explore factors that contribute to effective large system science strategies. Cliff Dahm will begin the panel by sharing some thoughts on good examples that exist, including an important international example that has an adaptive management context. Jay Lund will be the facilitator. Second, governance and adaptive management. This panel will explore topics that are central to effective governance and to increasing the likelihood that adaptive management will succeed. Dave Wegner will begin the panel by sharing some thoughts on the impact of regulations on science. Jessica Law will facilitate. Third, funding and resource allocation. This panel will discuss the challenges and opportunities of funding ongoing science, often in a resource-limited environment, and of developing stronger programs that better meet management needs. Alyssa Dousman will begin the panel by discussing program development and resource allocation related to the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council, and Aaron Forsman will facilitate. Fourth, legitimacy, co-production, and communication. This panel will delve into the factors that affect the acceptability of science to management and stakeholder constituencies and strategies to ensure that scientific work achieves acceptability. This panel has two presentations, first by Mark Lubell on perceptions of science in the San Francisco Bay Area. Second by Denise Locke on credible science in a complex world. Rainer Hoenecke will officiate on that one. And following the example that Tracy Collier set with the regional panel yesterday, we're hoping to engage the audience in all of these panels. We'll have a circulating microphone. The panels will probably be handled in slightly different ways depending on the preferences of the facilitator. But in general, we'd like, if you have a question, and we want you to have questions, to raise your hand so the moderator can see you, and then when you get the microphone, to please state your name and your affiliation. For the benefit of the people you're directing the question to. So that's our orientation for this morning. And at this point, I don't see Jay, but I'd like to hand the gavel off to Jay to start panel number one.